Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Art of Estate Planning Facebook Live. It is the 12th of May, and I am joined with a very special guest, Kirsten Lynn. So, welcome, Kirsten.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So, I'll just, I can see we're waiting for a few people to jump on. So, I'll do a little bit of housekeeping at the very beginning. Firstly, I'll promo. I'm running a webinar. This is just for the lawyers, and it's all about how to prepare and advise on testamentary trust with confidence. So that is coming up on Wednesday, the 26th of May. If that's something that you're interested in, I'm going to drop the registration link into the chat. It's a free webinar. It goes for an hour, and we're just going to look at what you should be charging for testamentary trusts, what to look for in a precedent, and basically if this is something you've had your eye on about leveling up in your practice, my tips on how to actually get you there. So I'll put the link in for that. But today is all about talking with Kirsten on how to balance your retirement and helping your adult kids. So if you've been paying attention to the property market, you probably noticed that this is a huge trend at the moment for our clients. And I think the stats are showing this intergenerational transfer of wealth while clients are alive is only increasing. So it's something that I think is really important to have on our radar. And I'm really excited to talk with Kirsten today about what we can do as a professional advice team, whether you're a lawyer, financial advisor, or accountant, how we can work together to remove as many risks as possible in the estate planning context. So before we dive into that, I'll just ask Kirsten, can you share a little bit about where you're based, what firm you're with, and the types of clients you like to work with?
Sure. I work at Stanford Brown, which is in North Sydney, and I've been there for, I think, 4 years now. I generally work in intergenerational wealth and family transition. So to go back to explain how I kind of got into that was I have a law degree and I practiced for a very short time, worked in government, did some other things. But when I got into financial advice, what really interested me was the intersection between different areas and how teams work together. So I found it was really one of the places where, as a financial advisor, I thought I could really help people was by making sure that they talked to the right people at the right time. So it wasn't necessarily me doing everything for them, but sometimes it was realizing when they had a need and finding the right person for them to talk to. And I noticed that particularly for estate planning, it was kind of, I found it was too often considered an add-on that, did you have a will? Maybe we asked if it had a testamentary trust. And that was kind of it. It was a tick. Whereas I thought there was this great opportunity to say, yes, you have an estate plan and a will, but what happens before that and who do you want involved? And if you brought the entire team together, that was a really great opportunity. So that's how I ended up coming into looking at intergenerational wealth transfer for clients, because I, generally work with high net wealth clients, but also family transition was the other big change that people are experiencing in their wealth, where wealth went from one part of the family to the other. So it was what I really like to work in is obviously we do investments, but also those major transition points in people's lives where somebody can be there with them and get the right team. And that's, generally different sorts of lawyers. It could be a family lawyer, it could be a estate planning lawyer, and getting them involved with the accountants at the same time. So that's who I generally work with. And I really like to assist clients in doing that sort of work.
Well, I'm a huge fan of that approach and share the same values there. I will just say to everyone watching, whether it's live or in the recording, Kirsten has really generously prepared and shared a white paper to support her presentation. So it goes into a lot of detail. In a moment, I will share the link where you can get your hands on that as well. So don't feel like you have to, be be taking a heap of notes because she's really summarized it all for you in that white paper, and it is a really valuable read. So thank you for doing that. I'll put the link so everyone knows how to access that. So I think we should just get started. I'm going to be quiet and let you take the reins.
Great. So I guess what I've got here is a bit of a taking you through a little bit about what I've talked about in the white paper. And the background to the white paper was that I was doing a bunch of different things with clients, but it really kept coming back to clients wanting to help their kids get into the property market and not knowing if they could do it and whether it was a good idea and how much they could help them and whether that was the right thing to do. And I thought, how would you go about answering those questions? And thought I would put down some of the conversations that I was having with clients, but also some of the other things that my clients could be doing that they hadn't necessarily considered. And the thing that I think is really important to say upfront is that it's rarely just me involved in this. It might be me bringing it to the client's attention, but a lot of the times this is stuff that lawyers are helping with or running or in charge of. The accountant might be, I might be getting a financial, a mortgage broker, those sorts of people involved as well. So what I really wanted to use the paper to do was a good opportunity to talk to clients about how they might do this, but also something I could share with lawyers, with other financial advisors, with accountants to say, here are some of the points that we could all be thinking about. And if you find a client who's asking these sorts of questions or in this sort of situation, this is the sort of point where it could be really useful to get a financial advisor involved who can help. And it's I just always see it as such a great opportunity for a client to walk out and me to have helped them. And as I said before, it doesn't have to be me doing the work, a way for me to have helped the client to move forward. So I'll take you through a few of the things that I think about. So to start off with, I'll just skip through this first little bit here. There's general advice, the usual disclaimer. Please assume all of that. Look, I've got a few other things that I'm working on in this series, so they'll come out in due course. They'll be on our website. There's really three parts to it as I see it. There's the starting point, which is putting your own retirement first. And for me, that's for a lot of financial advice comes into that, but there is also some legal advice that comes in there. So that's really the first step, which helps someone to think about how much can I actually do? Like, what capacity do I have to help my kids without impacting my own retirement or my own relationship with them, for example? Then the second thing to think about is the bigger picture. And in the bigger picture, I'm thinking about why would you want to help your kids, and what are the what are the values that you want to pass on, that you've had passed on to you, that make you want to give this assistance, and making sure it's really consistent with that. So if, for example, if you if you want your kids to be real self-starters, gifting them a home isn't really consistent with that, for example. And then the third is weighing up the options and getting advice. And I've included here a bunch of different things I've done with clients over the years, or other advisors I know have done with clients, but I've done pretty much most of these. So I guess the thing about this paper was really, it was about the questions to ask. And so throughout the paper that I'm providing, that you will get a copy of, there's a lot of different questions which say, here's some questions to ask. And it's really for, that you can give to a client, and then they can think about these questions before they go ahead. And so it's not really all answers, it's just the questions that get you started, because often it can be a different solution for different people. So it's really about thinking about what works, I guess, for my client or for my client's kids when I'm thinking about this. And then sort of the things that I think about in going through and weighing up the options. So I guess let me take you first through a little bit about, the things that I think about when I'm talking to clients about putting their own retirement first. So the first is, I guess, starting with what they actually need. And there's a couple of factors that I'm really thinking about there. They're living longer, their spending changes over time, and really that's a major one that clients don't expect. You probably find the same if you're a lawyer who's been talking to clients over decades. When they first start retirement, they're going on lots of trips and they're spending a lot more. And then by 75 or 80, I mean, they're coming in and saying to me, I don't really want to do that long haul travel anymore. My needs have changed. What I enjoy doing has changed. And so they're spending a bit less. And then later on in retirement, they might be spending more on healthcare costs. So that's, one of the factors. I guess the other one is we often spend more than we think. And so if you have ever thought about seeing a financial advisor, or you do see a financial advisor, you walk in and you don't actually know how much you spend, you are definitely not the first person who's come in who hasn't known what they spend, or if you guesstimate it and it's wrong by about half, you are definitely not the first person who that's happened to either. And so one of the places that we start if it's a new client is getting a great idea of what it is that they spend or want to spend. Because you can't know how you can help your kids until you know how much you yourself are going to need. The next one, this is really just all for financial advisors, investing and protecting for the long term. So making sure they've set up, know how much risk they want to take, how they prefer to invest, how much liquidity, so how much cash and reserves they're going to need. And then thinking about sequencing and compounding risk is really about what happens to your money over time. So depending on when you start drawing out from from your funds, if the market falls in that time, that's a problem over time. But if you put money in and you've left it there for a long time, you've got the benefits of compounding. So that's a really important piece that all financial advisors will all cover. Planning for aging very much is where the lawyers get involved here. So in a couple of different ways. One is making sure that I guess my clients have the right decision makers. And so I would have the same conversation actually with the kids as with the adults, but in the reverse. So when people are in their 40s and 50s, I'm asking them, how are your parents going? And what do you know about what their plans are? Do you know who the decision maker is if anything goes wrong? Because it's the kids who are going to be doing so much for their parents in those years and really need to know what their parents want. So it's important for them, but also for the parents to have had, the conversations with who the decision makers are. So I'm thinking, depending on where you are, it depends on what this is called, but I'm thinking about enduring powers of attorney or financial powers of attorney. I think that's right. Name for it, or the other one is the medical power of attorney, or we call it the appointment of enduring guardianship. Then the other thing that I'm talking to clients about, and I would say this is the most important bit that no one wants to talk about or comes in thinking they're going to talk about, or even want to admit to themselves. But in the back of their minds, people worry about how much aged care is going to cost, just as they worry about how much it's going to cost to, for their kids to get into the property market. And if they want to help their kids at some stage, and that's a really important goal for them, but they're worrying, how much am I going to have to set aside for aged care because I don't want to leave home, but if I have to, how much is it going to cost? That's one of the things that I like to address, because then that's done. They have that peace of mind. And, we don't necessarily do all this work ourselves, and not all advisors do it. There tend to be aged care specialists. There are specialists also in finding people aged care at home or residential aged care. So that's the third. And then the fourth, which is right up your ally, Tara, is regularly reviewing your estate plan. So I'm reminding my clients at each review meeting that they need to think about who they've appointed in all their positions and how the distributions work and whether they still are the right ones that they want. Not just to think that they've got a will and they've done it, but are the right people still in the right positions? Is the person that they appointed getting too old? If they wanted to protect a child who was vulnerable, has anything changed there? And that's a really important point. And then trying to get them to go back off and see an estate planning lawyer, which I know is one of the, big things that you talk to people about, how you work between financial planners and lawyers to make sure that continual initial setup and continual review process can work. If anyone's online, I just thought I'd catch a breath here and see if anyone had any questions.
We've got 25 people tuned in at the moment, but I don't think we've got any questions yet. So if you're watching, we're open to taking questions. This is Kirsten and I were talking at the beginning, and we're like, it's kind of we're planning on having a bit of a chat and being responsive to the issues that are relevant to everybody. So don't be shy with your questions if you do have them for Kirsten.
Yeah. I think a lot of that is fairly kind of straightforward, like things that make sense. And all I was doing in my white paper was actually bringing them together. So people had kind of a list of, these are all the things to think about. Considering the bigger picture is something that I've been thinking about, because I do find people say, I've given money to my kids, and then, they're taking, they've put some of it on their mortgage, but they're taking a holiday. And I think it's a difference between generations, because a different generation might have said, an older generation, I'm widely generalizing, but this is what I've tended to find from clients, are thinking, well, they should be putting it all on the mortgage and paying that all down, because they remember the 18% interest rates. We're not there yet, but we do have rising interest rates now. But a different generation is saying, actually, what are the things that we value? What are the memories we want to make with our kids? And so I put down some of my thoughts about some of the things to think about, so that there wasn't that disconnect of, I gave my kids this thing and they didn't value it, or they valued it differently from the way that I valued it. And I've put together a bunch of questions that I can talk to my clients about their philosophy on money, and about, transferring money and what they want to achieve and what matters to them and what matters to their children and what they want for their children. And I think the other interesting thing is, not only can you find that there's a difference between what a parent might think and what their child might think, but also between the two parents and what they're wanting for their children. And so I think having just a discussion about the bigger picture is great, because then if they're really well-intentioned, assistants might not miss the mark. So I'll tell you some of the things that I thought were kind of the things to think about. I've called it foundations. So I'm thinking about asking clients about the money messages that they got from their parents that they want to pass on to their own kids. I asked them about the help that they got from their parents. So you can imagine someone who comes in and says, my parents never helped me, so I do or don't want to help my kids for exactly that reason. Or my parents really valued education and spent a lot on our education. I really want to do the same. I feel like that's the right thing to do. So it's important to understand that. And also, I often ask about their experiences with their parents' estate, because if their parents set things up in a way that was really simple, or if their parents might not have, put anything in place, that experience can really have an impact on how, I guess, they think about what they want to do for their own kids. The second is the story that they either want to tell or that they the story they want to tell or the story of how they got their wealth. So they could either be, I've called them a steward or a builder here. So somebody who's built up their own wealth, or someone who's received family wealth and they feel responsible for passing it on. And that can impact what they want to do for their own children, whether they see they're keen for their kids also to be entrepreneurial, or whether they really want to make sure that their kids, understand how wealth should be managed, or the conservatism of how they might manage wealth, what the money means to them, which can have a lot to do with how they built up or received the money. And the other is legacy, what they want the money to stand for. So that could be that could talk to philanthropy. It could be that they want to make sure that their children have the same values in how they treat the money. So that's an important part of it as well. And that story and that, what the purpose of the money is really can impact, I guess, how people think about it. The next is, I guess, the relationship between them and their children predominantly. And I guess, whether their children get on or not, which can be important in that how they set up all their plans now and all their estate plans. It can be whether their kids are financially secure or not, or vulnerable or not, can impact what they choose to do now, whereas as opposed to what they do later on. And I've got some of the things that I've done with my clients in those exact situations with vulnerable kids. And when I say kids, I mean adult kids. And I guess whether the children can be great kids but not really good at financial management, and what their needs might be. Those are all really important parts when you're thinking about this. And then finally, the transition time. And I've kind of broken it down to 4 main transitions that you might see. The first is you might be giving financial assistance to kids. That's really driven by the need of their kids. So getting into property market is obviously the big one. Paying for school fees is another one. Another transition could be just getting kids involved in management, and that could be management of my clients' wealth, or management of a part of the wealth that's handed on. That can be an important transition point. The next is lifetime gifts. So when you're getting to the point where you know that you're not going to need those funds anymore, whether you decide to pass those on, not just the control of them, but actually pass on the funds. And the other one, naturally, is the testamentary gift or gift in your estate. So those are the big picture questions that I think are really important to think about before you go on and say, so how much should I give? How much should I give my kids to buy into the property market, or how should I give it to them? If you've thought about some of these things, some of the solutions or options kind of flow a little more easily on from there.
Yeah, I love all of that, Kirsten. And I know, coming from my perspective as a lawyer, I just want to look at the black letter of, okay, well, is it a gift or a loan, and is it being documented and all of that? But I as you're saying it, you can't really underestimate the psychological and money lessons and values that sit there. And when you were sort of saying, the older clients lent their kids money which they thought they would use to pay off the mortgage, but instead they went on a holiday. Like if that was me and my parents, we would have that exact situation. It would cause huge tension because they just had different values about how to spend their money, and they would prefer to give it away than take themselves on a luxurious holiday.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons why it can be helpful to discuss, because if they haven't had the discussion with their kids, or haven't even thought about it themselves, haven't even sat down and analyzed, like, why would that upset me, then we can cause tension. And the purpose here is not to have this, parents who want to help their kids and they've got good intentions, giving funds to kids, and then everyone ends up, not being happy with what happened, either the person giving the money or the person receiving the money. So it's that way that can be helpful, that I think, you absolutely got to document it. Although maybe you choose not to. I guess there are situations where people might not choose to, but you've got to do all those other things, or at least have made informed decisions about all the other important things. But if you haven't stood back for a sec and said, hey, what do I want to achieve here? Why does this matter to me? Then you won't be in a good position to kind of understand what your children might be doing and why they might want to use it in a different way. And if, they don't value, if one of your kids, for example, has their own children and one of them doesn't, understanding why you're giving them the money and what your thinking is can help you with that really difficult question, for example, of do you have to give the money equally to different children? Or can you go with what they need? So I think it's useful to ask.
Yeah, I love it. I really do think getting to the root of some of these philosophies and values and drivers pays off in the long run in the estate planning context, in terms of not having simmering tension between either siblings or parents and adults. And what we're trying to do in an estate planning context is reduce disputes. And so it's actually all the way back at these inter vivos gifts that we can set the groundwork for that. So I love it. And I can see
you've seen a lot, right? Which is
someone,
my sister got more than me for this thing, or I didn't have kids, so I didn't get this, or I was more successful and so they didn't. And if you've kind of had those conversations about why it is that you're doing things, maybe you can have addressed that earlier. And there's never going to be a perfect solution to any of this, right? That you're always going to make a trade-off, but you can do it with better information, hopefully.
Yeah, I love that.
Okay, so finally, this is where everyone wants to get to, which is the solutions mode of what can we actually do. And I obviously think people should seek advice, and by that I mean accounting advice, legal advice, financial advice, before they make a decision on the options, and canvass more different ideas. Property is a big one, so it's a great one to start with. And I've split it out into 4 different ways that I think I've found people helping their kids this way. There's obviously helping with a deposit directly, which is giving kids money, which that's your big question about loans versus gift. What's interesting there is there's actually, from a financial advice perspective, loan versus gift is important, but I'm also thinking about where's the money coming from? Are they taking it from their super? Can they access their super? Can they put money back into their super if they need to later on? Are they redrawing from equity or from an offset? Are they creating debt? How are they going to pay that back? Where does that fit with their savings capacity and their plans? If we're there far enough in advance, can we set up investment portfolios or bonds that could, meet this need later on? Can they make regular contributions to that pot that might go towards what they're trying to do? Or do they buy an investment property, and sell that, for example, that they use to help kids? So, and then, then it comes to, documenting loans, repayment terms, making sure you don't get statute barred, considering whether you're making the loan yourself, you're making it through another entity and how that might work. And, thinking about whether you want to make a financial agreement and or ask your children to make a financial agreement between them and their partner seek to quarantine anything in a relationship breakdown. So it's not just, how much to give. There's all the other parts of it that you can think about, which is lots of things I guess you're talking to clients about in documenting loans and gifts.
Yeah, it's so multifaceted, because then we've got the family law side. What happens? Is it repayable or forgiven on death? Yeah, and then I was also thinking one that you don't have there, but that I saw recently within my own family actually, was building an extra dwelling on the existing property for another family member, and how that whole thing works. And so whether that's extra dwellings for children, adult children, and their families on, in this case, it was a farm, or even granny flat situations, and who, like the contribution of funds can get really messy and intermingled with the land title, and then, granny flat agreements and concessions, like it can get complex really
That's
quickly.
actually I'm seeing more of that, I think, and I put that under buying a multi-generational property. But
yeah,
that, do you put another dwelling on? I've got a client doing that at the moment. And how does the funding work? Who's paying for what bit? And the other one is the granny flat, which particularly if you're involved with Centrelink, if you do all the right things up front, it can work well. But how is that going to play out? And if someone leaves, what happens? If there's a divorce or a death, what happens? There's a lot to think through.
Yeah.
So the other one is helping with the deposit indirectly, which I just like to put in because I think one of the things that people discount is that they've, let their kids stay at home while they're saving, and they've paid for all their food and all that sort of thing. That is helping with the deposit. It's indirect, but you are helping. So an important one to think about that you could offer is not just cash, for example, and it's worth bearing that in mind in the way that this can all work, but you can also help kids by just letting them stay at home without paying rent or even board. And then providing a guarantee is the other way of helping with a deposit indirectly, in that you're helping them to kind of have enough that they can then that they can buy a property before they might otherwise be able to. And that comes with, I guess, a whole host of other considerations that we don't necessarily need to go into, but it's definitely a one to consider and just be cautious about. And then buying a home in which your child can live is the one that I've seen done a couple of times for vulnerable kids who or kids who don't just simply will never own enough to be able to buy a property. So not because they aren't able to look after the funds, but just because of their earning capacity, and that they weren't able to borrow themselves or don't have the discipline or regularity of income to be able to make repayments. So I've seen that a couple of times, and generally speaking, I've seen it as the client buying the property in their own name and passing it on in their estate to the child who lives in the property. But, a couple of other options are things like buying as tenants in common or buying as joint tenants, but thinking about how that transfers on death, or, buying it in the child's name with a loan agreement or some sort of caveat on title. There's a few kind of different options of doing that, I think. And then you've got to consider how the costs are shared. Are you buying the property and then expecting the child to continue to pay for it? Are they able to do that? What are your expectations? What are their expectations? And then the one you've already talked about, buying a multi-generational property, or creating a multi-generational property, perhaps, is the other way of saying it. So when you have a property that starts off as just one party's, and then other people either move in or you add another dwelling, which is a really interesting development. And one I've seen more over the last couple of years than I had previously, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the reality of property prices at the moment that people are getting creative about what they can do.
Yeah, yeah. The other reason I've seen it actually is for the older generation who don't necessarily want to move into residential aged care, but want to stay living at home, but can't necessarily, there's too many risks of them maybe perhaps being just on their own, or there's benefits to sharing. So, you know, shared meals or that sort of thing. So sometimes it can work both ways that way. Then I guess a couple of others are, you know, separate investment pools for children or grandchildren. So not helping with property, but putting funds aside. And there's a couple of different things that I've seen here. So either they've created an investment portfolio that funds ongoing expenses that a child might have. So, you know, it could be something like funding school fees, and they put some capital aside to pay out to fund that. There could be segregated investment pools when there's superannuation or family trust. So you could have a pool that you invest for yourself, and as people age, we tend to invest a bit more conservatively than we might when they're younger, because they've got they don't have the same long time horizons, and they don't have the same capacity to earn the money back if there's a fall in the market. So you might segregate into two different pools within the same entity. I've also seen family trusts be set up for children. So where a pool of capital is put into a family trust, the child plus perhaps a parent is responsible for running, and that comes with the benefit of learning about markets and how they work and how to make those sorts of decisions, which, you know, if there's enough money at some stage that they might receive either in their lifetime or from their parents' estate, one of the important things is for the children to learn how to manage money. And perhaps for the parents, it could be important to pass on how they view the money, and that can be quite practical, not just saying, you know, I see myself as a steward of the money, but here's how I make these decisions and how I protect portfolios by, you know, together with a financial advisor, for example, but here's how I make these sorts of decisions. And then the other is informal trusts or investment bonds for grandchildren is another way that people might help their children by removing the need for them to provide for their own children. You know, those sorts of informal trusts or investment bonds could help their children to help their own children to buy properties or cars or fund higher education, that sort of thing. Professional advice is another one that people don't think of. So if, you know, if you are retired and something happens to your kids and they're no longer able to work, or something has to do with grandchildren, and they have high costs of health, medical care, then most people are going to want to step in, and they're going to be the backstop. They're going to be the safety net that pays if the children don't have the right level of insurance, or just, you know, to be able to fund that. So helping to fund insurance advice for kids or adult kids, or helping them to pay the premiums, actually can be a win-win situation where my clients can be protecting their own retirement by making sure that their kids have everything in place so that they're protected if, you know, they're unable to work because of accident or illness. And then the other is funding financial advice. Obviously, that's a benefit for everyone involved, including for me to be able to help kids more directly. But it's a way that, you know, it could be like just a general advice session where I could just be explaining to them how markets work and how to start, you know, some basics of things like, you know, changing into markets and diversification, all that sort of thing. Or it can be just helping them to make some prudent decisions earlier, adding to their super, paying down their debt, getting a handle on their own cash flow. So that's another way that parents can help, by funding some advice.
And Kirsten, my favorite way is paying for the estate planning for the adult children as well. So whether it's like, it's your 18th birthday and we're going to get your will and power of attorney, or even, every Christmas I'm like, the kids are getting estate plans for Christmas. I think it's such a good, it's a really valuable gift for the children that they're probably not going to do themselves. So I think that goes hand in hand with the insurance.
I'm definitely adding it to that slide. I hadn't even crossed my mind that I hadn't included that. But yes, absolutely, paying for estate planning, and I have clients who absolutely do that. And often it goes into the same thing. So if you've got a family loan agreement and you've kind of worked how that fits with all the repayments, it makes kind of sense potentially to all go and get their wills done and that sort of thing together. Yeah. So. And then, these are the lovely ones that people don't think of necessarily. Paying for private schooling actually is a big one, but funding joint holidays, I think, is quite an interesting one that I've seen some clients are doing. I've certainly got a client who funds for her children. They're all in quite different locations, to all come together for family holidays, and that's eventually coming out of their estate. Of her estate, because she's using the money now, but it's creating memories, and it's using money for things that perhaps the family couldn't afford to do these holidays because they're busy doing school fees and mortgages and that sort of thing. So it's creating great memories for the kids and the grandkids. Another one is buying holiday home that everyone can use, and so it's another experience gift, but that requires capital, but facilitates great experiences. And then, paying for joint interests or pursuits, such as, going to the theatre with a grandkid, or taking them to music concerts, or taking them to sports events, whatever it is. These are things that, you're basically passing on wealth to your children by funding these, or, by funding it for the grandchildren. But it's definitely one not to think about, and it's not one that people automatically think about, I find. And then obviously time, and this is the one that you really, I think grandparents really hope that their kids appreciate. So looking after kids, preschool kids, taking kids to and from school, or to and from activities, or looking after grandchildren during school holidays, sharing knowledge, sharing skills, or having them to stay the night. And it's one of the things where, adult kids and, you and I are very much in that age bracket where we're trying to balance two partners both working while also trying to look after children. And it doesn't require a big capital outlay from my clients, but it's a massive thing that they do for their children. And I guess one of the things I do is remind them of that, because even if I've got to the point back there where I've said, look, you really can't help them buy a home without impacting your own retirement, here's a bunch of things you can still do for them, and they're really important things and valuable things. So,
absolutely. And you can quantify, if there's care provided instead of daycare, that's actually quantifiable for them to realize how much they are contributing, or, the overnight stays and how much is the babysitting rate. So, it's easy to sort of think, oh, it's not that big a deal, but for the adult children, they're saving so much.
So they're basically the sorts of things that I talk about in the white paper. And as I do things for different clients, I'm just adding it to the list of things that I'm doing. But I think recap, the reason I started doing this originally is because I wanted to put together some of the things that already happened or that people already did and say, you know, here's the big picture. And when estate planning lawyers are talking to clients and they're saying, oh, I want to do this, I want to help them with that, or I'm already given these gifts, or I've thought about whether I should or not give these gifts, or I might not still have that home because I might give it to my children during my lifetime. You know, you can put it into a framework that really helps people to work out what they can have the capacity to do and what they want to do and why they want to do it, and then come out with an option that really meets the needs of them and their kids, perhaps more than the most obvious option, although I don't think there's many of us right now who'd be turning down a capital sum to help buy a home. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Kirsten. That was so valuable. So everyone, we're going to wrap it up. We've got about 5 minutes. So if you do have any questions or comments for us, put them in the chat. I mean, my main goal for this presentation and why I asked you to come and speak to everybody about your white paper is just to remind everybody about the importance of a multidisciplinary advice approach. And I think, you know, coming at it from the lawyer lens, you know, there's so much that you do as a financial advisor around inter vivos transfers and gifting that I think few lawyers would be doing. And it's easy for us just to think, you know, if we're involved at the beginning, at least to be like, great, how are we going to document that? What might that do under the estate plan? And perhaps vice versa for the financial advisors listening, you know, it just a reminder that yes, you're doing all of this work, and then just to, you know, tap in the lawyers at the appropriate juncture to document whether it's a property agreements, granny flat agreements, you know, the family law part of the like when I'm thinking at it through a family law lens, it's really important, I think, about and an estate planning lens. Is it a gift or a loan, and what are the consequences of that? So I really do
got into the blended family aspect here, which, you know, adds a completely different level of consideration that's needed.
Yeah, that really supercharges the complexity, doesn't it? Yeah, I think this has been an amazing reminder to everyone about how broad the issues can be. And I loved that you said at the beginning, you know, you just start with the questions, because I really think it's probably a choose your own adventure based on the answers to the questions. You know, two clients who at the first glance could look to be really similar could go down totally different pathways depending on how they respond to those questions. So yeah, I think this is something we really do need to have on our radar. If you look at the economic wealth transfers report, you know, we're talking billions and billions of dollars that are projected to be transferred during people's lifetimes, even before we get to estate planning in the future. So this issue is not going away. So it's good to have the white paper resource in our toolkit. And thank you for everything. So last call for questions. Otherwise,
and I'm very happy for people to share that with their clients, even if they're not ending up and going on and asking for financial advice. You know, it's out there to be read and shared. And I think it just helps people to start asking questions.
Absolutely. Well, everyone's being really quiet today, so there's a lot to digest.
They might be having a very busy May and June.
Yes, that's what I'm finding, is that everyone's like catching their breath, I think, after April. So Kirsten, on behalf of everybody, thank you so much. If you are watching this after the event on the replay, Kirsten and I will see this, so throw your comments and feedback in, and we'll reply after hours as well. So again, I'll wrap it up. Thank you so much, Kirsten, and take care, everybody.
Thank you.